3 weeks ago, my sister Emma laughed as she handed me a crumpled envelope from our grandmother's estate, calling it charity paperwork for the family failure. Yesterday, that same sister was on her knees begging me not to destroy her life with what was inside. My name is Evelyn Drake, I'm 27 years old, and I'm about to tell you how a fake will became the most expensive mistake my family ever made. If you've ever been the black sheep who got the last laugh, this story will give you chills. Before we dive into how I went from family disappointment to holding all the cards, hit that subscribe button, but only if you love watching karma work its magic. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Evelyn Drake, and for 29 years, I believed I was the family failure. While my sister Emma, 32, built her real estate empire and married into old money, I was the struggling artist who wasted her potential on a tiny gallery in Portland, Oregon. Our grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, had been the matriarch of what was once New England's most prominent banking family. The Whitmore fortune had dwindled over generations, but Emma had always been convinced there were hidden assets somewhere. She'd spent years cultivating grandmother's favor, visiting every holiday, sending expensive gifts, playing the perfect granddaughter. Me? I was the granddaughter who sent handmade paintings and called every Sunday just to chat. Emma called it pathetic attention-seeking. Grandmother called it love. October 12, 2024. The call came at 6:47 a.m. Grandmother had passed peacefully in her sleep at 89. By the time I arrived at the family estate in Newport, Rhode Island, Emma had already been there for 6 hours, going through papers with the efficiency of a corporate raider. "Oh good, you're here," she said without looking up from grandmother's mahogany desk. "We need to find the safe combination." Grandmother always said she kept the important documents locked away. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect from old money, understated elegance masking centuries of accumulated wealth. Emma played the grieving granddaughter perfectly, accepting condolences in her $3,000 black Chanel suit while I stood beside her in a vintage dress I'd found at a thrift store. "Evelyn always been the artistic one," Emma would tell visitors, her voice dripping with condescension. "She finds meaning in simple things." The will reading was scheduled for the day after the funeral. Emma had insisted on using her corporate attorney instead of grandmother's longtime lawyer, claiming it would be more efficient. I should have seen the red flags then. October 14, 2024, 2 p.m. Harrington and Associates Conference Room. The mahogany table gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Emma's attorney, Richard Harrington, spread out the documents with theatrical precision. "Ladies, your grandmother's estate is complex," he began, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses. "There are multiple wills, some predating others, and certain irregularities we need to address." Emma leaned forward eagerly. She'd already spent the inheritance in her mind, the Newport mansion, grandmother's jewelry collection, the mysterious Swiss accounts she was convinced existed. However, Harrington continued, the most recent will, dated just 6 months ago, is quite clear in its distributions. He slid the first document across the table. Emma's eyes lit up as she read her portions. The Newport estate, grandmother's investment portfolio worth $2.3 million, the antique jewelry collection valued at $800,000. Then came my portion. A single line item. "To Evelyn Drake Matthews, my beloved granddaughter, I leave the contents of my personal safe, trusting she will understand their true value." Emma actually laughed. "A safe? That's it?" Grandmother probably kept her reading glasses and some old photographs in there. Harrington's expression was carefully neutral. "The safe is located in the library, behind the portrait of your great-great-grandfather. The combination is your grandmother's birthday, backwards." Emma was already calculating. "Well, there might be some small jewelry pieces, maybe some cash." "Evelyn, we can split whatever's in there 60 to 40. I'll take the larger share since I'm handling all the estate complexities. I stared at the will, something nagging at me. Grandmother had always been deliberate in her words, choosing each one with the precision of someone who'd navigated decades of family politics and business negotiations. Actually, I said quietly, I think I'll handle my inheritance myself. Emma's smile faltered slightly. Don't be ridiculous. What would you do with grandmother's trinkets? I have the contacts to properly appraise and sell anything valuable. But I was already standing. I'll take what's mine and go. That evening, alone in grandmother's library, I stood before the oil painting of Cornelius Whitmore, the family patriarch who'd built the banking fortune in the 1800s. The painting swung aside easily, revealing a steel safe that looked far more sophisticated than I'd expected. Grandmother's birthday backwards, December 15th, 34. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through generations. Inside, 3 thick manila envelopes sat alongside a leather-bound journal and a smaller locked box. The first envelope was labeled "For Evelyn's eyes only" in grandmother's precise handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, then Emma has likely dismissed your inheritance as worthless trinkets, just as I knew she would. Your sister has always seen value only in obvious places, jewelry, property, bank statements. She has never understood that the most powerful things in this world often hide in plain sight. ***, what you hold in your hands is not just an inheritance. It's justice. I set the letter aside and opened the second envelope. Inside were photocopies of documents that made my blood run cold, bank transfer records showing Emma had been systematically stealing from grandmother's accounts for 3 years. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, but growing bolder. The final theft, just 2 months ago, was $75,000. Email printouts between Emma and someone named D. Morrison discussing how to handle the old woman's growing suspicions and ensure maximum inheritance distribution. But the third envelope contained the nuclear bomb, a copy of what appeared to be grandmother's real will, dated just 2 weeks before her death. The one Harrington had read was dated 6 months ago. According to this newer will, Emma was to receive nothing. Everything, the Newport estate, the investments, the jewelry, all of it, was left to me. With one devastating note, I leave nothing to Emma Matthews, as she has already taken enough. My phone rang. Emma. Evelyn, I've been thinking. Since you're clearly overwhelmed by all this estate business, why don't I just handle your safe inheritance too? I'll give you a fair market value for whatever's inside, and you won't have to worry about appraisals or sales or any of that complicated stuff. I stared at the real will in my hands. That's very generous of you, Emma. It's what family does. I'm thinking we could settle on, say, $10,000? That's probably more than whatever old jewelry is in there anyway. $10,000. For an estate worth over $3 million. You know what? I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Let me think about it. Can we meet tomorrow? I'd like to discuss this face to face. Of course. Come to my house around 2 p.m. We can sign the paperwork and get this settled quickly. After she hung up, I opened grandmother's journal to a recent entry. Evelyn called today, just to ask about my garden. She doesn't know about the thefts yet, but I can see Emma's true nature more clearly each day. She visits not out of love, but inventory. Each compliment about my jewelry is really an appraisal. Each question about my investments is a calculation. I've changed my will. Emma chose greed over love. Evelyn chose love without knowing there was a choice to make. That tells me everything I need to know about who deserves to carry on the family legacy. I photographed every document, uploaded them to cloud storage, and made copies. If Emma wanted to play games with wills and inheritance, she was about to learn that grandmother had taught me more than just how to paint watercolors. October 15th, 1:47 p.m. I stood on Emma's doorstep in Beacon Hill, clutching a manila envelope that contained copies of all the evidence. Her house was a testament to inherited wealth, or in this case, stolen wealth. The Georgian architecture, the perfectly manicured garden, the BMW in the circular driveway. Emma opened the door wearing an outfit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Evelyn. Come in, come in. I have the paperwork already." She led me to her home office, where legal documents were spread across her mahogany desk with the same theatrical precision Harrington had used. But these weren't estate documents, they were purchase agreements. "I took the liberty of having everything appraised," Emma said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "The jewelry in grandmother's safe is worth about $8,000. There were some old stock certificates, but they're for companies that don't exist anymore. Worthless paper, really. So I'm thinking $6,000 is more than fair for the whole lot." $6,000. She'd lowered her offer by $4,000 overnight. "That's quite generous," I said, setting my envelope on her desk. "I thought so too. Much easier than you trying to navigate auction houses and appraisers on your own." She slid a contract across the desk. "Just sign here, and I'll write you a check today." I pretended to read the contract while studying Emma's face. She was practically vibrating with excitement, probably already planning how to spend the jewelry money. "Emma," I said slowly, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." Her smile never wavered. "Of course. Did you know about grandmother's financial difficulties in her final years?" A flicker of something, guilt? Fear, crossed her face before the smile returned. "What do you mean?" "I mean the money troubles. The missing funds from her accounts." Emma's hand stilled on her pen. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Grandmother was very wealthy. That's why there's such a substantial inheritance." "Right. Of course." I opened my envelope and spread the bank statements across her desk. "Then you won't mind explaining these transfers." The color drained from Emma's face as she stared at the evidence of her thefts. $5,000 here, $15,000 there, $30,000 last month. All transferred to accounts bearing her name. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. "From grandmother's safe. Along with some other interesting documents." I placed the real will on top of the bank statements. Emma's eyes widened as she read. Her hands began to shake. "This isn't real," she said, but her voice cracked. "This is fake. You forged this." "Did I forge the bank statements too? The emails discussing how to handle the old woman's growing suspicions? The transfer records from last month?" Emma slumped in her chair as the full scope of her situation crashed over her. "Evelyn, please. I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can. Just like you explained to Harrington why he should use the 6-month-old will instead of the one dated 2 weeks before grandmother's death. You don't understand. I was handling grandmother's finances because she was getting confused. The money I took was for her own good, to protect it from what? From her granddaughter who actually loved her instead of just seeing her as a bank account." Emma's mask finally slipped completely. "You have no idea what it's like being the responsible one. While you were playing with paintbrushes, I was building a real career, a real life. I deserved that inheritance. I earned it. By stealing from a lonely old woman? By being there. By visiting, by caring, by calculating the value of her jewelry every time you complimented it? By asking about her investments so you could figure out how much was left to steal? Emma stared at me with pure hatred. What do you want? I smiled. Justice. I pulled out my phone and showed Emma the photos I'd taken of all the documents. I've already uploaded copies to cloud storage and sent everything to 3 different lawyers. The real will, the theft evidence, the email correspondence with your accomplice, all of it. What accomplice? I don't know what you're talking about. D. Morrison. The person you've been emailing about handling the old woman's growing suspicions. Should I call them and ask if they'd like to comment on your conspiracy to defraud our grandmother? Emma's face went ashen. Diana Morrison is just a friend. Those emails were taken out of context. Were they? Let me read you my favorite one. I pulled out a printed email. Emma, we need to make sure the new will never sees daylight. Harrington owes me a favor from the Peterson case. He'll use the older version without question if I tell him it's the most recent. The old bat will never know the difference. Emma closed her eyes. Jesus Christ. There's more. Once we control the narrative, Evelyn will take whatever scraps we offer. She's always been too weak to fight for anything. That one really hurt, Emma. I never meant for it to go this far. Grandmother was so old, and she wasn't thinking clearly anymore. I was protecting the family assets. From your own family? From you. Emma exploded. You with your pathetic little art gallery and your phone calls every Sunday like some kind of saint. Do you know how hard I worked to build my relationship with grandmother? How many boring dinner parties I attended, how many times I listened to her ramble about the old days. And the whole time you were stealing from her. I was ensuring my future. Your future too, if you just sign that damn paper and take the money. I stood up. Here's what's going to happen, Emma. You're going to return every penny you stole from grandmother. With interest. You're going to confess to fraud. And you're going to transfer all the assets you received from the fake will back to the estate. And if I don't? Then I go to the police, the district attorney, and the Newport Daily News. Prominent real estate executive defrauds dying grandmother. I'm sure your clients would love to read about your ethics. Emma was quiet for a long moment, calculating. What do you get out of this? Revenge? I get what grandmother intended. And you get to avoid prison. That's more mercy than you showed her. The assets are already integrated into my business. The house, the investments, I can't just hand them back without destroying everything I built. Then you should have thought of that before you decided to steal from a dying woman. Emma stared at the evidence spread across her desk. How long do I have? 48 hours to start the transfer process. Or I release everything. Evelyn, please. We're family. We can work something out. Split it 50-50, no one has to know about the complications. I gathered my documents and headed for the door. Family doesn't steal from each other, Emma. You made your choice 3 years ago. October 16th, 9:23 a.m. My phone rang. Emma, sobbing. Evelyn, please. I've been up all night. I'll return the money, all of it. Just don't go to the police. What about the assets from the fake will? I can't. Not all of them. The house has a mortgage against it now. The investments are tied up in my business. It would take months to unravel everything. Then you'd better start now. Evelyn, please. If this comes out, it won't just destroy me. David doesn't know about any of this. Neither do the kids. You'd be destroying their lives too. David, her husband. A decent man who'd married into what he thought was a respectable family. Their 2 children, 8 and 10, who called me Aunt Jessie and sent me crayon drawings. For a moment, I wavered. Then I remembered grandmother's journal entry about Emma calculating the value of jewelry with each compliment. You should have thought about them before you decided to steal from our grandmother. What if I could make this right another way? I'm listening. The Whitmore Foundation. Grandmother always talked about starting a family foundation for the arts. What if I used the assets to create that instead of just transferring them back to you? You'd run it, of course. It would be your project. I paused. It wasn't what I'd expected, but it wasn't without appeal. Go on. $3 million to start. The foundation would support emerging artists, exactly the kind of work you do. You'd have complete control, a real salary, everything you need to make a difference. And you'd get to avoid criminal charges while looking philanthropic. I'd get to make amends. Isn't that what grandmother would have wanted? I thought about it. A foundation would help hundreds of artists like me. It would be a living memorial to grandmother's belief in supporting dreamers and creators. I want to see a detailed proposal by tomorrow. Legal documents, financial projections, everything. And Emma? Yes? You still have to return every penny you stole from her personal accounts. That money comes back to the estate, with interest. Of course. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for giving me a chance to make this right. After she hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment, staring at the evidence that could destroy my sister's life. Was justice always about punishment, or could it sometimes be about transformation? October 17th, 2 p.m. Emma arrived at my apartment with a leather portfolio thick enough to choke a horse. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. The Whitmore Foundation for Emerging Artists, she announced, setting the portfolio on my kitchen table. $3.2 million in initial funding. Annual operating budget of $400,000. Your salary as executive director would be $120,000 a year. I flipped through the documents. They were thorough, professional, and surprisingly thoughtful. Grant categories for visual artists, writers, musicians. Scholarship programs for art students from low-income families. Exhibition funding for galleries showing emerging work. This is impressive, I admitted. I worked all night. I also talked to 3 other foundations about best practices. I want to do this right. And the money you stole from grandmother? Emma slid a cashier's check across the table. $127,000. Every penny I took, plus 8% interest calculated annually. I stared at the check. It was more money than I'd ever seen at once. There's one more thing, Emma said quietly. I owe you an apology. Not just for the theft, but for everything. The way I've treated you over the years. The condescension, the dismissal, the cruelty. I convinced myself I was better than you because I made more money, married well, lived in the right neighborhood. But you were the one grandmother truly loved. You were the one who called just to chat. You were the one who saw her as a person, not an asset. I studied my sister's face. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something I'd rarely seen from her, genuine remorse. Why now? I asked. Is it just because you got caught? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Do you remember when we were kids, and I won that art contest in middle school? I nodded. Emma had painted a landscape that won first place in the regional competition. You helped me with that painting. You showed me how to blend the colors, how to create depth. When I won, I told everyone I'd done it myself. I let you watch me accept the award without saying a word about your help. I remembered. I'd been proud of her, proud of us both. It had never occurred to me to demand credit. I've been taking credit for other people's work my whole life, Emma continued. I convinced myself I deserved it because I was older, smarter, more successful. But I wasn't any of those things. I was just willing to steal what others created. Emma. Let me finish. Please. Tears were streaming down her face now. Grandmother knew. She saw who I really was, and she saw who you really were. That's why she changed the will. That's why she left you the safe with all the evidence. She knew you'd use it wisely, whether that meant destroying me or giving me a chance to become better. I reached across the table and took my sister's hand. What happens now? Now I spend whatever years I have left trying to earn forgiveness. Starting with yours. October 20th, 9 a.m. I called Richard Harrington's office and requested a meeting. It was time to address the elephant in the room, the fake will he'd read at the estate meeting. Harrington's office reeked of old money and older secrets. He greeted me with the kind of smile reserved for people he thought he could intimidate. Miss Matthews. How can I help you today? I placed the real will on his desk. You can start by explaining why you read the wrong will at my grandmother's estate meeting. His smile faltered. I'm not sure what you mean. This will is dated 2 weeks before grandmother's death. The one you read was dated 6 months earlier. Either you're incompetent or you're complicit in fraud. Harrington's face went through several color changes as he studied the document. Where did you get this? From my grandmother's safe, where she left it for me to find. This could be a forgery. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Emma's voice filled the room. Diana Morrison is just a friend. Those emails were taken out of context. Then another recording, from our conversation 2 days ago, D. Morrison. The person you've been emailing about handling the old woman's growing suspicions. Harrington sank into his chair. What do you want? I want you to file the correct will with the probate court. I want you to explain to Emma that her inheritance is void. And I want you to transfer all assets to their rightful owner. And if I don't? Then I take these recordings, along with copies of the emails between Emma and Diana Morrison, to the State Bar Ethics Committee. How long do you think you'd keep your license? Harrington was quiet for several minutes, probably calculating his options. The assets are already distributed. Emma has integrated them into her business operations. The house has been refinanced, the investments reallocated. That's Emma's problem. She'll figure it out. This will destroy her financially. She should have thought of that before she chose fraud over honesty. What about the foundation idea she mentioned? Couldn't we work something out that benefits everyone? I smiled. Actually, we already have. November 1st, 2024. The Whitmore Foundation for Emerging Artists held its inaugural board meeting in the library of what had once been grandmother's Newport estate, and was now the foundation's headquarters. Emma sat at the end of the conference table, no longer the arrogant executive who'd tried to buy my inheritance for $6,000. She was now the foundation's development director, a position she'd accepted after returning all the stolen assets and liquidating her business to make restitution. Our first round of grants totaled $200,000, she reported to the board. 40 artists received funding, with an average grant of $5,000. We've also launched the Margaret Whitmore Scholarship Program for art students from low-income families. The foundation had become something beautiful. Not just a monument to grandmother's memory, but a living testament to second chances and the power of art to transform lives. After the meeting, Emma and I walked through grandmother's garden, now maintained by the foundation as a sculpture park for our grant recipients. Do you think she would have approved? Emma asked, gesturing at an abstract metal sculpture created by one of our first grant recipients. I think she would have loved it, I said. She always believed art should challenge people, make them think differently. Like her will did. Exactly like her will did. Emma stopped walking. Evelyn, I need you to know something. The person I became over these past few months, the person who apologized and made amends, that's not someone I could have been without being caught. Without being forced to confront what I'd done. I know. I was never going to confess on my own. I was never going to change. I would have kept stealing, kept taking credit for other people's work, kept treating you like you were less than me. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that justice and mercy aren't opposites. You showed me mercy by giving me the chance to make amends. But you also served justice by making sure I faced consequences for my actions. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is force them to become better. I thought about that as we continued walking. The foundation had given grants to 40 artists who might never have had the chance to pursue their dreams. Emma had lost her business, her house, and her arrogant certainty, but she'd gained something more valuable, the chance to become someone worth being. December 15, 2024. 3 months after the foundation launched, I received a call that changed everything again. Miss Matthews? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Newport Police Department. We've received some information about financial irregularities involving the Whitmore estate. Could we schedule a time to talk? My blood ran cold. What kind of irregularities? We've received a complaint alleging fraud in the handling of Margaret Whitmore's will. Someone named Diana Morrison has provided us with emails suggesting a conspiracy to hide the true terms of Mrs. Whitmore's estate. Diana Morrison. Emma's accomplice, the one who'd helped orchestrate the fake will reading. She was apparently trying to save herself by throwing Emma under the bus. Detective Chen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Could we meet in person? I have some documents that might clarify things. Of course. How about tomorrow at 2 p.m.? After I hung up, I immediately called Emma. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that involves handcuffs and criminal charges. 24 hours later, Emma and I sat in a sterile police interview room as Detective Chen spread out printed emails between Emma and Diana Morrison. The conspiracy was laid out in black and white: deliberate fraud, document tampering, conspiracy to defraud an estate. Miss Matthews, Detective Chen addressed Emma, these emails suggest you knowingly used fraudulent documents to claim an inheritance that wasn't legally yours. Emma looked at me, then back at the detective. Yes, I did. I blinked in surprise. Emma was confessing. I conspired with Diana Morrison to suppress my grandmother's real will. I also stole approximately $127,000 from my grandmother's personal accounts over a 3-year period. Detective Chen leaned forward. You're confessing to these crimes? I am. But I'd like to explain what we've done to make restitution. Emma detailed the foundation, the returned money, the liquidation of her assets to fund the artistic grants. Detective Chen listened with the expression of someone who'd never encountered a criminal case quite like this one. Miss Matthews, she addressed me, you were aware of these crimes but didn't report them? I was working with my sister to ensure restitution was made to the intended beneficiaries. The foundation has distributed more money to deserving recipients than Emma ever stole. But that doesn't excuse the original fraud. No, Emma interjected, it doesn't. I'm prepared to face criminal charges. But I'd like to request that the foundation be allowed to continue its work regardless of what happens to me. Detective Chen closed her notebook. I'll need to discuss this with the district attorney. This is unusual. January 10, 2025. The courtroom was packed as Emma stood before Judge Patricia Hendricks for sentencing. She'd pled guilty to all charges: elder fraud, conspiracy, theft, document tampering. The maximum sentence was 10 years. I sat in the front row, watching my sister accept responsibility for crimes that could have destroyed multiple lives. "Your Honor," Emma's attorney began, "my client has made full restitution and has created a foundation that has already benefited dozens of artists and students." The prosecutor wasn't impressed. The defendant engaged in a systematic campaign to defraud a dying woman. The fact that she's tried to buy her way out of consequences doesn't change the nature of her crimes. Judge Hendricks studied the documents before her. "Miss Matthews, you pled guilty to serious crimes. However, the court has received over 100 letters of support from grant recipients, board members, and community leaders who attest to the positive impact of your restitution efforts." She paused, considering. "The court sentences you to 5 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and permanent restitution monitoring. You will continue to serve as development director for the Whitmore Foundation under court supervision." Emma nearly collapsed with relief. 5 years probation instead of 10 years in prison. However, Judge Hendricks continued, "This sentence is contingent on the Foundation's continued success and your ongoing compliance with restitution requirements. Any violation will result in immediate incarceration." As we left the courthouse, Emma turned to me. "I can't believe you wrote a letter of support for my sentencing." "I wrote that you were a different person than the one who committed those crimes." "I believe that's true." "It is true. But only because you forced me to become different." October 14, 2025. Exactly 1 year after Grandmothers Will Reading, I stood in the Whitmore Foundation Gallery, surrounded by artwork from our second annual grant recipients. The foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined: $5.2 million in assets, grants to over 200 artists, scholarship programs in 12 states. Emma approached, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "To Grandmother's Real Will," she said, raising her glass. "To second chances," I countered. We clinked glasses and watched visitors explore the gallery. A young sculptor explained her work to a group of teenagers. A painter discussed technique with an elderly couple. A photographer captured the joy on a child's face as she discovered abstract art for the first time. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just taken the $6,000? Emma asked. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd never stolen from Grandmother in the first place?" Emma smiled ruefully. "Every day. But then I see something like this," she gestured at the gallery full of emerging artists, "and I think maybe everything happened exactly as it was supposed to." My phone buzzed with a text from someone named Marcus, one of our first grant recipients, just got accepted to graduate school. The foundation grant made my portfolio possible. Thank you for believing in artists like me. I showed Emma the text. She smiled, but I could see tears in her eyes. "You know what the best part of this whole story is," she said. "What's that?" Grandmother won. She wanted justice, but she also wanted love to triumph over greed. She wanted the family legacy to mean something beautiful. She got all of that, even after death. I looked around the gallery, at the art, the artists, the visitors whose lives were being touched by creativity they might never have encountered otherwise. "She always said the most valuable inheritances can't be stolen," I said. "What do you mean?" "Love, integrity, the courage to do what's right even when it's hard. You can't put those in a safe or write them into a will. You have to choose them every single day." Emma nodded slowly. "I spent 32 years choosing wrong. I'm grateful I still had time to choose differently." As the evening wound down and the last visitors left the gallery, Emma and I walked through Grandmother's garden one more time. The sculptures gleamed under moonlight, silent testimonies to the power of art to transform not just spaces, but lives. "Evelyn?" Emma said as we reached grandmother's favorite bench. "Yes?" "Thank you for giving me the chance to become someone grandmother could have been proud of." I sat beside her on the bench where grandmother used to read poetry on summer evenings. She was always proud of the person you could become. She just needed to make sure you had the right motivation to become her. Emma laughed. Being threatened with prison and public humiliation was certainly motivating. Sometimes love looks like consequences. And sometimes consequences look like opportunities. We sat in comfortable silence, two sisters who'd found their way back to each other through truth, justice, and the transformative power of art. Somewhere in the house behind us, grandmother's portrait smiled down from the library wall, no longer guarding secrets but witnessing the beautiful thing those secrets had become. The fake will had been Emma's biggest mistake. But it had also been the key to unlocking the real inheritance grandmother had always intended to leave us, the knowledge that it's never too late to choose love over greed, truth over convenience, and justice over revenge. In the end, that was worth more than any amount of money, even $3.2 million and a foundation that would outlive us both. Sometimes the greatest inheritances aren't the ones written in wills, they're the choices we make when no one's watching. Emma learned that the hard way, but she learned it. And grandmother? She got exactly what she wanted, a legacy built on love instead of greed. Justice doesn't always look like revenge, does it? Sometimes it looks like second chances and art galleries and 200 artists getting the opportunity of a lifetime. Have you ever had to choose between punishment and redemption? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this tale of fake wills and real justice gave you chills, hit that subscribe button. I've got more stories of karma working in mysterious ways.